Cecily Strong is known for bringing big, infectious energy to Saturday Night Live. Some of her most popular characters include drunken Fox News host Jeanine Pirro and the girl you wish you hadn't started a conversation with at a party. And even though Saturday Night Live is on vacation right now, Cecily has been so busy. She has received her second Emmy nomination. She stars in a new musical comedy series called Schmigadoon. And at the same time as all of that, Cecily has just released her new memoir. This will all be over soon. And this book isn't really what you would expect from a comedian. It's like a collection of diary entries that Cecily wrote over the course of the pandemic. Here's our conversation. Cecily, what a pleasure. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here with you.
And it's wonderful to have you here. I have literally just closed the book and finished it, and I feel like I've spent time with you personally. This memoir starts out as the pandemic is hitting New York. Can you take me back to that moment and how you were feeling?
I started writing this in March of 2020, and in January of 2020, I lost my younger cousin, Owen, to glioblastoma, which he had been fighting for a little over a year. It was sudden for me, even though he had brain cancer. It was still, I believed he would beat it because he just was such a courageous, strong, funny, optimistic person. And I thought if anybody could do the impossible, sort of, it would be Owen. Losing him was just it felt like I'm holding this huge boulder, and I don't know how to go into any room with this and how to talk to anybody about it. And then I met somebody. We decided we would be officially dating on Sunday of March, whatever that week was. And then on Thursday, he had COVID. We knew so little at that point. It was so early, and I was quarantining for 2 weeks. And I just had this little thermometer, which was the only thing that I was kind of relying on to tell me if I was sick or not.
Wow.
And the anxiety was so high. And then some days I just would get very, very low, where I just sort of would choose depression over anxiety and just, kind of not want to be awake for that day. And so I couldn't write, and I couldn't really think straight, just being afraid of what's happening with this person I'm seeing, what's happening with me, what's happening in the world, being afraid of my water in my building. And it was just a very scary time, and there wasn't a lot of space in my brain. And then I got out. I got an Airbnb with 2 friends. And once I knew I was leaving, it was like I took a shower to get ready to leave. And all of a sudden, I was able to think about all of this, and it sort of hit me all at once. And I was like, I have to sit down and write what I'm thinking. And that's that day I started writing. I wasn't able to sit down in that moment because in my haste in packing to leave, I spilled my trash and a million tiny clamshells scattered all over the floor, under the bed. Because of course I have a bed in my kitchen.
That is exactly,
New York apartment.
That is how it feels when you start reading the book, that it feels like a whole ton of emotions and experiences just come scattering out on the floor. And because you've done it in this diary format, you're not required to tell it in any kind of order. You just deal with things as they're occurring to you. And I want to come back to that intensity of the moment that you were in. But you've mentioned your cousin a couple of times, and I would love to know a little bit more about him. You lost him to brain cancer just before the lockdown. What was it that made him so special to you?
He lived really, really well. And I think over the course of writing this book, I was also trying to examine how Owen was the way he was. I think the best quote to describe Owen is he told his dad, despite the brain cancer, this has been the best year of my life. It's like he fell in love, and he had a band. He made music. He would do karaoke. He came to my shows. We'd go to basketball games. He danced on every dance floor. And it was just, he lived really, really well. And he sort of was the champion for the rest of us in him having brain cancer. And he was so confident. And I've sort of now have a little Owen voice in my head sometimes. And I have so much self-doubt. And so anytime I start I notice myself qualifying things, or I can't accept a compliment, or I can't see this as good. I have a little Owen voice now being like, come on, it's good. It's just accept it as good. Don't qualify it.
And that's what you're carrying around with you now. That's a really wonderful way to commemorate someone. But why do it as a diary? Why did you decide to do it that way?
Part of that is just, I'm not a writer in that sense. And I don't know that I could really, at this point in time anyway, and certainly not under feeling the way I was feeling, write a really polished novel, memoir style book. But what I know I can do, and what I was trying to do, was just be honest in that moment and sincere. And that's really why it's written that way. It's just, that's the most honest I can be. And that's what I know I have the ability to do.
But being that honest means that we got to meet an entirely different person than the person that we commune with on Saturday nights and laugh our heads off. You have really invited us into your private life, your private world, and how off kilter sometimes you felt, how open you were to magical thinking, how incredibly painful this was, and that there were days where you simply didn't want to have the conversations. You would acknowledge it with one sentence and move on to what else was happening. And I'm wondering what it was like to just let yourself be so vulnerable and so naked when you've often had this big personality and big comedy between you and your audience.
Right. And it was a little crazy feeling to publish it that was so personal. But for me, I'm sort of like, it was the same person that's done SNL all these years. It's always been me behind there, whether I shared it or not, or assumed that people knew things. And I think people didn't necessarily know things I assumed they did about me. I've learned over this past year and a half, after writing the essay, even just saying that you have anxiety and depression, which was not stigmatized in my house. And, it's like nothing to say that for me. And in fact, I'm very proud of how I've dealt with it and where I am, and that I treat it. And so, but some people, they didn't grow up that it's just helpful to even hear that someone else is dealing with these things. And so it's sort of in that spirit that I'm sharing, and in the spirit of, I think everybody went through a lot last year. And I'm just one voice that's part of that.
You were speaking about feeling anxiety and feeling depression and being really okay with talking about that. But did writing about it during the pandemic help you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, well, I also have a great therapist. So let's make sure I say that too. This was not my only therapy. But it is very therapeutic. And I think looking for, because you mentioned magical thinking, I've always been a fan of magical realism. And I sort of, in my writing, I found that I was making these little connections, and it felt like they were gifts, and it felt like they were a little bit of magic going through this pandemic. It's completely new. Nobody knows what's happening. And I think to be able to learn about Owen, for me, or to think about him, was giving me the opportunity to find moments of magic and moments of sunshine, and exploring ways to enjoy a very tough year.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are just tuning in, I'm Saroja Coelho, sitting in for Tom Power. My guest is Cecily Strong, who is the author of the memoir, This Will All Be Over Soon. She has also been a cast member on Saturday Night Live for the past 9 seasons. Cecily, you write about how emotionally taxing it was to be making Saturday Night Live during the pandemic. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, so the first SNL at Home show, I wasn't really a part of. I wasn't quite ready yet. And it was that week we found out our music producer, Hal Wilner, had passed away of COVID. And it was shocking. It's especially because, and I know Hal was just such an eclectic, distinct, singular person. There's no one in the world like Hal. And it was to lose him felt crazy. And we heard about it, and then we do our table read, and it's the first time we're seeing each other, and we're just in these little boxes on the screen, and then having to do this show on Saturday. So it was really, but I also, I think we watched the show along with everyone else because we were isolated. So I didn't see anyone else's contributions until Saturday when we'd see it all come together. And I think it was also really helpful for me to have something, like to have a focus. And it was a good distraction, and it was a lot of work because I don't know how to do all of the other parts of the job that I now have to do, like the technical stuff, filming it, and they're sending us microphones and green screens, and like I'm sticking bows on a dress to try to do wardrobe. Luckily, my friend Kevin was with me. He's really a great artist, so he would make all my props. My friend Matt would help film when he could. So it was like, that took all day. Just even like sometimes for me, trying to figure out an app, like the teleprompter app, will take me all day.
It's been an amazing year for that. I think none of us knew how many DIY skills we had until this past year and a half.
And I think I wouldn't even call them skills yet for me.
Let's listen to a clip right now. This is your triumphant performance as Fox News host, Jeanine Pirro. You know what I'm going to play right now. This is from the final episode of Saturday Night Live last season.
And now they want to put Kamala Harris in charge of the border. Sorry, Kamala Ding Dong, not on my watch.
That seems a little racist.
A little racist? Have you been listening to me? Colin, I'm still standing strong because I always did it my way. Hold that, Colin.
Oh, for sure. That's a lot left.
And now, the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. Sorry, Callan. My friend, I'll say it clear. Drink my cake, of which I'm certain, attempting. I've lived a life that's full. Bring in my other rhyme. I've traveled each and every highway. And more, much more than this, I did it my way.
That was Cecily Strong as a Fox News host, Jeanine Pirro on Saturday Night Live. I wish we could play the entire clip. If you want to see the sketch, you can find Cecily climbing into a vat of wine as she belts out "My Way." Oh my goodness. Cecily, how on earth did you come up with that sketch?
Well, Brian Tucker, who I write that with, he texted me that week and asked if I wanted to do a Pirro, and he said, I have this idea where she would sing "My Way," but he wrote it "Mawa." And I said, sure, we can do that. And then but we have to top what we did last time, because I always want to make sure we're upping the ante with her. And it was like, and last time I threw up red wine all over Colin. So then I said, so maybe I think I should go into a tub of wine. And what's fun at SNL is like, you can say these things, and then there's this team of these guys and gals and props and special effects who will make it happen for you. And then I sent a picture. I found a picture of this magician in a box like that. But he was like, there were chains and I think he was bleeding or something. So I was like, it should look like that, but without the chains and blood. But I think that's the size of it. And they made it, and the water was even warm. They even make it warm water for you. Well, it's not water. It was watered down grape juice. It was warm, watered down grape juice.
It is an incredible thing to watch. I mean, it's hilarious to listen to just now, and it only gets funnier as you watch it. And the crowd is absolutely roaring as you're singing. That must have felt, how did that feel?
It was unbelievable. That crowd really, I get teared up thinking about even hearing that. They were just so incredible. And in fact, just that kind of energy, it kind of makes it, you feel like anything can happen, that kind of magical feeling. And especially because it was the first time we'd had a full crowd. And everybody, I remember my stage manager before the show came out into the hallway, Jenna, and she's got tears rolling down her cheeks. And I was like, Jenna, what's wrong? And she said, the crowd, having a full crowd, it's unbelievable. And we went out there to do the cold open, and just, they stood for us that entire time. And it was just so emotional after the year we've had to then get to, what we do is this, and to get to share it with an audience again was unbelievable. And they were so good. And it was like they went, you know what? And we are going to be the best audience. We know you haven't had an audience for a year. So we're going to be the best audience you've ever had in your life and make up for all those moments where it sounded like no one's laughing because you're doing sketch comedy for 5 people.
Well, meanwhile, you've got Lorne Michaels saying that he wants you to come back next season. What's on your mind this summer as you consider what might be next? It's really... It'll be a conversation, and I think my agents have let me sort of do Schmigadoon first, and then the book, and then we'll really talk more about it. But it's tough to leave that place, and there's a lot of reasons to stay. And it's just such a wonderful, supportive, loving place. And I think the show is changing a little, and that people can stay longer, and there's more flexibility. And so, it's really going to be about how I feel and to make sure that I have something more to share. I would want to make sure I'm going to have more to offer and not just take up space. I'd like to take a minute to talk about your new show, Schmigadoon. You and Keegan-Michael Key play a couple who are trapped, of all things, in an old-timey musical comedy. What drew you to this project, Cecily?
Obviously I love musicals, so that's easy. And it's a show made by people who love musicals. And that's why they're able to, I say it's like sort of like laughing at your mom, like, I love you, but you know what you do. It's kind of that thing. But also when I got the scripts, the first draft of them, it was so genuinely funny, but it also had so much heart and so much joy. And to be able to share that at this time I couldn't ask for anything more.
It's an amazing thing to be able to share this memoir, This Will All Be Over Soon, which is such a study in grief and loss and all the complicated emotions that a lot of people have been sharing with you through this pandemic. And at the same time, work on something with high kicks and big jumps and singing songs. And my favorite moment, a musical skit all about reproductive health done. It's an amazing spectrum of emotions that you are offering to the world, dealing with yourself. I'm wondering what you've taken away from these two very different projects. Well, and to me, they're not even that different, because I think at the core of both of them is love. And even though I may be writing about grief, the reason that you grieve is because you love. And I wanted to tell everybody that I loved in my life, that I loved them, because we don't know how long we get with each other. And I don't know that we say it enough. And then on Schmigadoon, I told Cinco, who wrote it, how grateful I was to say his words, and because we don't get to say those things to each other all the time. And it's just, that's how I can share love. And it might involve high kicks, and it might involve a lot of crying, but it's sharing love. What a brilliant way to share love in all its different forms. Cecily, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you. You too. Thank you. That was comedian Cecily Strong. She is the star of Schmigadoon, which is out now on Apple TV+, and she has a new memoir, This Will All Be Over Soon, which comes out today.